Welcome to another edition of 30 Minutes of Football. I am your host, Brian McFadden. We made it to episode 2. As a reminder, we're going to be doing this every Tuesday and Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Once the season starts, we will start doing this 5 days a week. But for now, let's go ahead and get to it. And if our producer Anthony wants to bring me up on the screen, that'll be a good start. The love of doing live shows. There we go. There's my big, beautiful face. I hope everybody had a great 4th of July weekend. We will not waste your time with a lot of banter. We're going to go ahead and bring in our guest because you guys are here to hear about some NFL football. So very special guest, recent partner that we have engaged with, none other than Mr. Walter Football himself. Walt, welcome to 30 Minutes of Football, dude. How you doing?
Good. Hope you had a great 4th, and I'm excited to talk about football. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, and it's been awesome to partner with you. If you guys have been receiving the newsletter, you have seen the little Walter Football logo. So we're looking forward to continuing to work with him, and make sure to check out walterfootball.com if you have not already. He's been around for over 20 years, and hopefully he'll be around for 20 more. So Walt, do you understand the rules? We're just going to come up with some questions. We're going to ask each other. We do not know what either of us are talking about ahead of time, and we're just going to get to some nice organic NFL talk. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Great. So let's go ahead and jump in. 30 minutes of football with legit football starts now. Oh, and by the way, before we get started, I do have to mention that those sounds you hear are our notification chimes. I did not mention in last week's episode what those were. So when I was listening back in the podcast, I'm like, people have no idea what those sounds are. So we're going to play a sound every 5 minutes so that you and I, Walt, know where we are in our timer. We'll play a sound at halftime. We'll take a little break, do an ad read, and then we'll play a sound when the 30 minutes in. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start off today's episode asking you a question. And my question is, we had an article in today's Legit Football newsletter talking about Packers wide receiver possible free agent additions. But I want to phrase the question like you, Walt. So there's some notable veteran free agent wide receivers. Where do you think they'll land? So notably Julio Jones, Odell Beckham Jr., and we'll go ahead and throw Will Fuller in there. Where do you think those wide receivers end up playing in 2022?
So, I mean, there are a few teams that need receivers. You just mentioned the Packers. Obviously, they lost Devontae Adams, so they have to rely on Christian Watson. And I heard Aaron Rodgers talk up Alan Lazard, which seems like a disaster. I mean, we saw what happened to him in the divisional round of the playoffs last year against the Niners, where he caught one pass. And that was with Adams on the field. So now he's going to get number one receiver attention unless Christian Watson does great right away. So the Packers are definitely an obvious choice for the receivers you mentioned. I also know that the Ravens want to add a receiver as well. They lost Marquise Brown in the draft to Arizona. So they're relying on Rashad Bateman, who, we'll see what happens with him in his second year. He could emerge as a number one talent.
Getting perhaps a lot of sleeper, like fantasy hype, right? That he's kind of like the big, Bateman's going to have a big season. Kind of fantasy heads are talking about him. Are you of a similar mind?
I'm not like crazy about Bateman. I think I like him a little bit, but if he's getting hyped up, then he's probably going to go too early. So I like. True. I like to say that I like guys under the radar, but it's hard to find those guys these days with all the fantasy coverage. I mean, I remember back in 2007, I loved Wes Welker heading into that season, and no one was talking about him. But I feel like if that season were to happen now, everyone would be talking about Wes Welker. So it's crazy how things have changed so much. But yeah, going back to the original question, I think the Ravens are definitely a candidate for either Will Fuller or, DK Metcalf's not on the market, but someone could trade for him. He's been talked about that way.
Yeah, I actually mentioned on this show on Friday, and we had an article on Friday's newsletter that there is still an outside possibility that DK gets dealt. There's still an outside possibility. I don't think it'll happen that Debo gets dealt because apparently he has not rescinded his trade request. It's crazy to think of it happening at this time. I like Julio on the Packers. I think that makes the most sense. Apparently, Sammy Watkins, there's been some good stuff coming out about him, but I think you and I we know what we're getting with Sammy at this point. It's like the verdict is out on him. The talent is there. He's just not always committed to the game. But I think the Packers have to add a veteran. I think OBJ keeps coming up. I have a feeling he'll end up back in LA once he's healed. I mean, that's where he won the Super Bowl. I'll phrase another question to you, though. Do you think there's any possibility of Odell Beckham Jr. rejoining Cleveland? I've seen a little bit of talk about that. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's just smoke?
Yeah, it seems like smoke. I mean, crazier things have happened, but I would be surprised. I'd be surprised if he does much this year. He tore his ACL very late in the year,
Right.
torn ACLs are extremely difficult to come back from for receivers the year after. I remember last year with Cortland Sutton, everyone was talking about him having a good year with Teddy Bridgewater joining the Broncos, and he had a terrible season. It's the skill position players like Saquon Barkley. He was drafted, I think, like late first, early second last year. And
Cam Akers when he came back at the end of last season.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, yeah, these guys coming off their torn ACLs, the skill position players don't seem to do well heading into this year. That's why I'm down on like Chris Godwin, Robert Woods, those guys this year. I just don't like the guys coming out torn ACLs. And then the following year in fantasy, you can get good values with them. Like no one's talking about Cortland Sutton this year. At least I don't think so. And then next
Which is
year,
crazy with that quarterback upgrade.
Yeah, I think people are sleeping on the Broncos. I was talking about this with Jacob, my co-host on my podcast. The people are completely dismissing the Broncos. I don't understand why. They have a good defense. They have a solid offensive line. I think it's the best offensive line Russell Wilson has seen in years. Russell Wilson was healthy he was injured last year for the majority of the season, and he's not old. It's not like he's past 35. Like he can still play well, I think, and he's going to have a good receiving core. So I like Denver this year,
and a good running back tandem with Melvin Gordon coming back and Javonte Williams. Yeah, I'm big on Denver. I actually mentioned on Friday's show there was one of the topics we brought up was. So Ben Lindsay from PFF put out his top 10 rosters, and there were teams like the Eagles, the Browns, the Dolphins that were on that list, and teams like the Ravens, 49ers, and Broncos were not. And the Broncos were probably the team, with maybe San Francisco as well, as the team that I would have put in that top 10 roster. So I'm definitely with you there. I don't know if you saw this. So OBJ apparently, I don't know if he's an artist or he commissioned some sort of painting of Rams OBJ picking up Browns OBJ off the field. So I mean that kind of tells me all I need to know about whether he's going to return to Cleveland. Like he's literally drawing himself or painting himself lying on the ground in Cleveland. So I don't see that happening. What about Will Fuller? I'm a little surprised. I mean I know he's had injury history in Houston, didn't play much at all in Miami. Do you think that his deep threat is still viable? Do you think there's a team that could take a shot on him?
Yeah, I mean, he has great upside. Obviously, he has a very low floor. I don't expect him to stay healthy, and no one really should at this point. I'm looking at, you just mentioned Cleveland for OBJ. I think Cleveland makes sense for Will Fuller because Deshaun Watson's there. Now, obviously, Watson may not play this year. We don't know what's going to happen with that suspension or possible suspension. But if Watson plays, Will Fuller had a lot of success with him in Houston. So I could see that tandem pairing up again. The Browns have Amari Cooper as the number one receiver, but they don't really have a number two. It's like Donovan. They're like relying on Donovan Peoples-Jones. Yeah, I mean, he's so inconsistent. I think they need a number two. I think DPJ is probably better served as a number three.
I kind of would like to see Fuller back on Houston. I don't know that will happen, but I mean, you got Brandon Cooks there, solid number one, and then Nico Collins, seeing if he makes a second-year leap. Like, you don't have a lot of proven talent there, and if they believe in Davis Mills, which it seems like they do, I'm just not a huge Davis Mills fan, but I mean, he definitely showed flashes. He impressed with regards to his draft pedigree, especially against those other rookie quarterbacks last year. So I'd like to see him maybe get a deep threat, but like you said, his floor is so low, it's kind of hard to rely on a guy like that. Let's turn it over to you, Walt. Do you have any questions? Do you have any topics? What's on your mind with the NFL today?
So I am going to Las Vegas in 2 weeks, and I'm looking to bet some Super Bowl futures. I have already. So I wonder if you have any under the radar Super Bowl props or like teams that you're looking to bet on, like I would say maybe 30 to 1 or above.
So I rely on you for the betting odds. So I'm going to name some teams, and you let me know if they fit in that category. I mean, I imagine the Chargers are pretty rich at this point as far as Super Bowl favorites. The Bills are obvious. What about the 49ers? So I
think they're like 20 to 1.
Ooh,
so
yeah. Okay, let me try to give you something juicier than that. Teams that could sneak in. Denver, did they get above that 30 to 1 threshold?
They were 22-1 before Russell Wilson got there, and then when he signed, I actually bet it. When he signed, I was so happy. I was like, okay, we're gonna get 10-1, 12-1, something like that. And I think they're like 18-1. They barely moved when Russell Wilson got there, which is like, again, I don't understand why the Broncos are getting no love at all. You mentioned the running backs. I love Javonte Williams in fantasy, by the way, this year. Until Melvin Gordon resigned, is kind of like burst his bubble a little bit, but I still like Williams. But anyway, Denver is, I think Denver is definitely in play, but I think they're 18-1 or something like that. And you mentioned the Chargers. I bet them at 25-1 earlier in this offseason, and now they're 15-1. So I think people are really catching on to how good they could be.
Well, here's an interesting one. What about the Colts? What if Matt Ryan really is as good as he has been reported to have been in training camp? And if their weapons, let's say Michael Pittman makes a huge leap, let's say Alec Pearson, Jelani Woods, those rookies really come on. You already have Jonathan Taylor. You have a top 10 offensive line. You've got Darius Leonard if he can stay healthy. You signed Stephon Gilmore. I mean, you've got a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. You've got who I view is a top 10 head coach in Frank Reich. What are their odds? I mean, if you're going to bet somebody with lower odds, there's worse choices maybe than Indianapolis. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you can get them at 30-1. The Colts are interesting because Will Meade brought them up. He's a former PM for a hedge fund. He tends to put stock tips out there on Twitter, but from time to time he talks about football betting because he's really into that. And he mentioned the Colts as his team of choice yesterday. He brought up how Tom Brady went to a 7-win team and won the Super Bowl that next year. And then last year, Matthew Stafford went to a 10-win team and won the Super Bowl that year. And now Matt Ryan's going to a 9-win team. It's interesting to see what the Colts can get out of Matt Ryan because he's kind of been on the downtrend in Atlanta the past couple of years. But then again, you could also look at the supporting cast. He's had really nothing outside,
especially on the offensive line.
Yeah, the offensive line. Right. The offensive line has been brutal for the Falcons in the past couple of years. Jake Matthews has fallen off a cliff. They lost Alex Mack. And the receiving core, they lost Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley last year, played half a season. They had Kyle Pitts, but he was only a rookie. They've had no running game for a while now. So Matt Ryan is he's someone who's struggled, relatively to how he's played before. But I think with a better supporting cast, I think he could rebound. So I like your Colts suggestion.
So I'm going to throw one more crazy one out there, and it's going to sound like a little bit of a homer pick because I am a Dolphins fan. But what if these pieces fit together? They brought back essentially their entire defensive starters with the addition of Melvin Ingram to pair on the other side of Emmanuel Ogbah. What if the addition, like the individual ingredients of adding a Tyreek Hill to a Jalen Waddle when you already have Mike Gesicki there, when you brought on Cedric Wilson as just a really nice number 3, you brought on Raheem Mostert, and what if Tua takes that leap? They made Teron Armstead, Connor Williams, they made some additions at the offensive line. What if a third-year leap from Tua becomes a real thing? Like, what are their odds? Could that be a fun, like, spicy bet?
Yeah, they're 33-1 the last time I looked. Obviously, it depends on which sportsbook sportsbooks have their own odds. So,
sure.
I think the Dolphins have a wide range of outcomes. I think their ceiling is pretty large, pretty high with the additions you mentioned. Connor Williams, Teron Armstead to the offensive line is huge because last year Tua just had no protection, and now he's going to have a lot of protection. I think they're 33-1 because people are just not believers in Tua. But look at some of the quarterbacks who've gotten to the Super Bowl lately. You had Jared Goff a few years ago. You had Jimmy Garoppolo 2 years ago. Like these are not like high end quarterbacks. Like they're pretty average. And if Tua can be average or better, I think he could definitely get there. So I like the Dolphins. I like their upside. I think they have a low floor though, because I think there's a little bit of that Vince Young 2010 or 2011, whatever year it was, that Dream Team Eagles thing that they were talking about. Like the Eagles had so much hype that year. They brought in so many big names and they just fell flat on their face because their expectations were so high. So I think the Dolphins have a huge risk to them if you're betting them because they could just really disappoint or who knows, they can go the distance. So I think like they're one of the few teams that have a wide range of outcomes.
I've always kind of likened Tua to a Drew Brees. And a lot of people don't really, or they may remember, but they don't give a lot of emphasis on Brees' career starting in San Diego for the Chargers, where he was a solid quarterback, but by no means the Hall of Famer he became when he went to New Orleans. Just this kind of hyper accurate, not a ton of arm strength, but hyper accurate, understands progressions, understands how to get the ball in his playmakers' hands and let them do the rest. If Tua can jump to that kind of level, or even a portion of that level, if the rest of the supporting cast gels, then hey, you could do worse. 33-1. I like that. So that's going to be my answer as a Dolphins fan. You want to take an outside bet? Let's go ahead and bet on the Dolphins. So once again, guys, we're working on a visual timer. I'm hoping to have this by Friday. I don't know how much time we have left until halftime, but I have some topics I want to bring up in the second half. But Walt, anything quick you want to get before halftime here?
Well, to answer my own question, I actually like the Eagles at 33-1. I love the roster. Jalen Hurts is obviously the issue there, but I think with AJ Brown, he could play a lot better. Plus, the Eagles have a top 5 offensive line. They get Brandon Graham back from injury. He got hurt in week 2 last year. That's going to be enormous. They added James Bradbury across from Darius Slay. I like the linebackering core has improved with Hassan Reddick.
Yep.
I think like roster wise, like if you exclude quarterback, their entire roster, I think you can make the claim that they had the best roster in the NFL. Jalen Hurts is like I said, he's the issue there. But as I said before, Garoppolo and Goff got to the Super Bowl, so I think the Eagles have upside, especially in that conference. It's a very weak conference.
I love the draft picks too. Jordan Davis in the middle and Nakobe Dean getting him where they did. If he is healthy like he claims to be, that's just going to make that defense even better. I like that. I believe they were number 6 or number 7 in Ben Lindsay's top 10 rosters. So it's the same idea as the Dolphins, right? If Hurts makes that leap, this team could be scary, and they could easily be one of the best teams in the NFC, and all you need is to go on a run. They're in a division which is theirs for the taking, essentially, with Dallas really the only major roadblock. So I like that. I definitely could see. Let's pick a Colts-Eagles Super Bowl. Why not? Wouldn't that be fun? I've got a lot of Eagles fans in my life who would love to see that. So I am going to go ahead and mention my topic, knowing that it's going to be halftime any minute now. So I want to talk about rookie running backs. Going into 2022, do you have a favorite? As it can be from a fantasy perspective, it can be from an NFL perspective. What rookie running back are you liking to have the most success in 2022?
I like Breece Hall. I mean, he's going to get so many opportunities with the Jets. Like usually second and third round running backs tend to get overdrafted.
That is the halftime, but keep that thought in mind. We will pick that right back up when we go to the second half. So I just want to mention that make sure to go to walterfootball.com. If anything, you can already tell this guy knows his odds. This guy knows his betting stuff. We're planning on having him on the show regularly as kind of like our Vegas, our betting, our odds guy. Walter, I hope that's not a surprise to you. We've kind of talked about that, but especially when the season starts. So make sure to go to walterfootball.com for all that kind of content. And Legit Football, if you don't know, is your better way to get your NFL news. It's a free daily NFL newsletter. Get it caught up in the around the NFL in just 5 minutes a day or less. Just go to legitfootball.com, join, enter your email address. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy reading it, if you're enjoying the podcast, you can always email me, Brian@legitfootball.com, or look us up on Twitter @_legitfootball. And Walt, you want to quickly plug your Twitter and contact info?
Yeah, I'm at Twitter, at Walter Football at Twitter. I just post links to the content we produce every day at walterfootball.com. It's all free. Tons of draft content, fantasy, picks against the spread. We grade every signing. So you can get everything at our site at walterfootball.com.
See, we're just a couple of guys bringing you free NFL content. What more could you want? All right, let's get this show back on the road. Let's go ahead and start the third quarter. Walt, have you given yourself a little halftime speech? Are you feeling good for the third quarter here?
Yeah, I'm pumped up. I think we're going to have a good second half.
Awesome. So let's keep on with the topic we were talking about, rookie running backs. So you mentioned Breece Hall. Do you want to continue on that or give a second name?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll continue a little bit. Hall has every opportunity, and I was mentioning that second and third round running backs tend to get overdrafted in fantasy because there's so much hype with them, and yet the coaches, if they trusted them more, if they liked them a lot more, they would have taken them in the first round. Sure. So they have to win their jobs, and I think that's something people overlook. especially, amid the fantasy hype. But I think with Breece Hall, I don't think he has much competition there. Michael Carter is going to catch some passes, but he's not a guy who can handle a workload. Like there's no veteran running back he has to supplant. Obviously, it could change if they sign someone, but right now, I think Breece Hall has an easy track to start and get the majority of the workload, and he can catch passes very, very well. So he's going to be very involved in that Jets offense. So I like him a lot. A sleeper I like, and also maybe to win Offensive Rookie of the Year is Isaiah Spiller, the running back from the Chargers. He was a 4th round pick, and right now he has Austin Eckler standing in his way. But Eckler's a small guy. He tends to get banged up. I know he hasn't missed many games, but he can miss games given his stature, and I think if he does, Isaiah Spiller could get the majority of the workload in with the Chargers, and that offensive line the Chargers have is great. So if Spiller gets opportunities, I think he could have a huge year.
How do you feel about Dameon Pierce in Houston? I mean, he seems to be the rookie who has the cleanest pay, maybe with Bryce as well, or Breece Hall as well, as having the cleanest path to starting week 1. Do you like him for Houston? Do you think he can we'll just keep it from a fantasy perspective. Do you think he's got a path to success?
Maybe, he was, I believe he's in the 4th round. I think if the Texans liked him more, they would have drafted him earlier. And he has to pass Marlon Mack, which sounds easy on paper. Like Marlon Mack wasn't active for the Colts in the second half of the year last year, but the Texans, they like Mack a little bit. And I think right now, if the season were to begin right now, Mack would get the start in week 1. So Pierce still has to pass him, and we'll see what happens in the preseason. Like if Pierce looks great in the preseason, he's going to be on track to start week 1. But then again, he's going to get so much hype and people are going to draft him early. That's what I was saying before with the fantasy hype. It's so hard to find these guys. You almost have to be drafting on the right day and see a great fantasy performance in the preseason the night before, and then just draft that guy
before everybody else gets on it. Yeah,
it's crazy how things have changed. It's insane.
Yeah, the idea of a sleeper, it's so much more difficult to find a true sleeper these days because there's so much content out there. I mean, we put content out, you put content out, so we're part of the problem in that regard. But it's really fascinating just how much information is out there on these rookies and on these second-year players. Making everybody is, our newsletter in particular, our open rates went up during OTAs and training camp. People want to know who's the next guy, who's going to make that leap. I'm going to give my pick for sleeper. I already had 2 dynasty drafts where I drafted this guy, so I don't have to worry about that here. Redraft, if some of my people in my leagues are listening, that might be giving something away, but I like Tyler Algier. The running back from BYU, he was drafted, I believe it was in the 5th round by Atlanta. I like him for a few reasons. I love him as a prospect. He's somebody that was, I think, second in PFF PFF grades for rookie running backs last year, players that are rookies this year. He is a bruiser. I think he fits that Arthur Smith offense really well. I mean, if you think about what he did in Tennessee with Derrick Henry, but he's also a guy that did not have a scholarship when he started at BYU. He actually had to work at Walmart. He had some kind of Division II offers, and he chose that instead to walk on at BYU to get that better D1 opportunity, and had to work at Walmart just to pay tuition. So I kind of like that from a workman standpoint, but I also really like his landing spot in Atlanta. I think that Atlanta will use Cordell Patterson a little more in a wide receiver role as compared to last year, where towards the end of the season, he was like 85% a running back, 15% a wide receiver, especially because you mentioned earlier, they don't have Julio anymore. They're not going to have Calvin Ridley this year. They basically just have, Kyle Pitts as a second year tight end. You want another receiving piece. You know that Cordell Patterson has that ability. So I could just see a guy like, who did they draft? That was it, Damian Williams, I believe, right? Yep. They signed Damian Williams to be, I guess, the de facto starter. That doesn't really scare me. I mean, if you're looking for a guy to take a flyer on, I think ADP, he's falling in like the 4th to 5th round from what last I checked. You might know ahead of me, but that's like my fantasy ride or die. Like Matt Berry has his ride or die. As far as rookies, Tyler Algier, I got him in both of my dynasty leagues. What are your thoughts on Algier and that Falcons situation?
Yeah, I like Algier. I like that he had to fight for his football spot. Kind of reminds me of J.J. Watt, how he used to deliver pizzas, which is kind of insane to think right now how great he's become. I like the fit there. He really doesn't have much to pass. Like, I just mentioned Marlon Mack. I think if Mack were on the Falcons, he would be the starter there. That's like, I don't like Damian Williams at all. Cordell Patterson's not someone who's going to handle a high workload. Like, he's going to get his touches, obviously, but
they need him as a receiver. They need him lined out wide because they don't really have anybody else.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, they really don't have much at all offensively. We'll see what happens with Drake London. I don't think he's 100% Kyle Pitts, right? But they're excited about some of these receivers they signed, and they're all terrible. So they need, like you said, they need Patterson at receiver, and that just means that Algier is going to get more touches in the backfield. So I like that suggestion. If he's going later than he should, then I would definitely have interest in picking him up.
So hopefully too many people are not listening because I want to keep Tyler Algier for myself.
I know that feeling because I'm usually in like 3 or 4, maybe 5 leagues, and people print out my rankings, so I know exactly who everyone's going to pick. I never get anyone I like.
You could do some mind games with them then. Like, if you know what they're going to pick based on your rankings, just, flip the switch. So I'll turn it back over to you, Walt. What's another topic or question you have today for the NFL?
Okay, so I was discussing this on another podcast this weekend, and this is a 2-part question. So one, what would you say is like the worst team in the NFL, or maybe the worst 2 or 3 worst teams in the NFL? And I bring that up because the second part, there were odds on will there be an 0-17 team this year? So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
0-17 is so hard, just like 17-0 is so hard. I did a power ranking show on the 49ers Rush podcast with John Chapman. I'm a weekly guest on there, so I know some people from 49ers Rush listen to them, so listen to this show, so shout out to you guys. I ranked Seattle Seahawks dead last. And that could change if they change their quarterback situation. There's been talks, we mentioned on Friday's show, about how they have actively engaged with the Cleveland Browns for Baker Mayfield, but as it stands now, they already have possibly the worst quarterback situation in the NFL with Drew Lock and Geno Smith, and they lost Bobby Wagner, right? And we mentioned Russell Wilson is now in Denver. And I just, across the board, they don't have a lot of talent. Kenneth Walker, we didn't mention second-year running backs, but I just don't think he's walking into a great situation. Other than you got Lockett and you have Metcalf, which we mentioned earlier, Metcalf, there's still that outside possibility. He has not been signed, and a lot of these wide receivers got their big contracts. So I am very much down on the Seattle Seahawks. I think Carroll should think about retiring soon, personally. Obviously, he's a fantastic coach who's won a Super Bowl and is deserved all the accolades, but he's 70 years old now, and I just think that has not shown to be innovative in a way that perhaps an Andy Reid or Bill Belichick has as they've gotten older in age. So I would like to see a little bit of a revamp. I think they're approaching the season too as though they're going to compete, which is strange. Like, that they didn't make the kind of roster moves that maybe I would have done. So if I were running that organization, so I definitely have Seattle dead last. Who do you have? Do you have like an idea of who you have as like number 32?
Yeah, I think it's Chicago. I don't think people are talking about how bad they are. I've been looking at their roster. I can't think of a position where they have a top 20 player. Like you just mentioned with Seattle. Like, Seattle's going to be bad this year, but they have Metcalf and Lockett. Like that's pretty good. And they have some potential with their offensive line. But with Chicago, I just don't see anything. Like Justin Fields, like maybe he takes a second step, but with the supporting cast, I just don't see how that happens. The receiving core is just Darno, Mooney, and nothing else.
Komet. I mean, there's another thing. Like, if he makes a leap, I've seen some hype around Komet, but that's it. Yeah.
Right. Their offensive line, I think, is the worst offensive line in the NFL. David Montgomery, some people like him. I don't think. I just think he's a plotter. I'm not a big fan. They lost Khalil Mack. They lost Akeem Hicks. Their secondary was already a disaster. The linebacker core is Roquan Smith's fine, but like they don't have anything else there. I think Chicago is just gonna be dreadful. But they play in the NFC, and I believe they play Atlanta this year, which is also a terrible team. So they like. To answer my own question about the 0-17, I don't think an 0-17 will happen. And you don't really want to root for it because you feel bad for these guys. They are trying hard, or at least most of them are. So I don't think there will be an 0-17, but I think Chicago might go 1-16 or 2-15.
Yeah, a few more teams maybe to throw out for the bottom of the list there. Carolina, kind of the same idea. I like a lot of their young pieces. I'm a big Brian Burns fan. I went to Florida State, so I've been following him since college. Jeremy Chin, has the potential to be a top 5 safety. CMC obviously is one of the best running backs in the NFL if he can stay healthy. But once again, you're rolling out Sam Darnold, who I think at this point we all know who he is. So unless they make an upgraded quarterback, I'm higher on Atlanta. A lot of people kind of throw Atlanta at the bottom of the list. I just feel like I like Arthur Smith as a coach. I think he's going to make that team competitive. Doesn't mean they're going to compete for a division title, but as far as we're talking about the kind of the bottom 3 teams, and then Houston. I just think Lovie Smith is like a placeholder head coach. I don't know that they have shown themselves to have a true vision. I've mentioned I'm not a huge Davis Mills fan. I hope he proves me wrong. He definitely, I would say, outplayed what I thought he could do in that situation last year. So maybe there's something there. But they just don't have a lot of, you mentioned top tier talent. Like, I mean, who can we name? Maybe Brandon Cooks is like a top 20 wide receiver. But outside of that, Laramie Tunsil may be a top 20 O tackle, but that's pretty much it. So I would throw Houston in. And who else kind of rounds out your bottom 3 there?
Yeah, I think Houston and Atlanta. I don't like Atlanta either. Well, I mean,
I think I might be the only one. Everybody I talked to, I think I'm fairly certain when I did the show with John 49ers, he had Atlanta 32. So I think maybe I'm a little too high, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think I have Atlanta like 31 or 30. I don't like them very much at all. But one team we'll disagree about greatly, I think, is Carolina. I actually bet Carolina to win the Super Bowl.
What are the odds for? Nice.
175 to 1.
Yeah.
But that's predicated on them trading for a quarterback.
Yeah.
If they don't trade for a quarterback, that's just going to be dead money. But they could trade for Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo. And I like the roster overall. I love the moves they made in the offensive line. They made so many upgrades this offseason to the blocking. McCaffrey could stay healthy. They still have DJ Moore. And their defense had, I believe they had a top 10 pass rush in terms of pressure rate. So they have good pieces. They just don't have a quarterback. And I think people forget they were 3-0 last year before McCaffrey got hurt. So if McCaffrey can stay healthy and if they can get a good quarterback, I think they can make a run in the playoffs.
I put a lot of emphasis on coaching too. So I think I'm just not a Matt Rule fan where I am an Arthur Smith fan. I think that might be the difference with me and a lot of the people who are putting Carolina ahead of Atlanta. In my rankings, I had Atlanta ahead. But here's a question on this same topic. How are you viewing Jacksonville this year? How much of a difference do you think Doug Pederson makes? They made a ton of additions. They spent a crap ton of money to get those additions, but no one can say they didn't make a concerted effort to improve their roster. Do you think that Pederson makes a significant difference? Do you think that Jaguars team is better? They can't get much worse. What are your thoughts on Jacksonville for 2022?
So Jacksonville's another team I bet to win the Super Bowl earlier in the offseason.
They have to be lower than 175. What are their odds?
They were 150 to 1 before free agency. And I thought
they were better odds than Carolina.
Yeah, it's strange. I loved the amount of time or the amount of money they had to spend in free agency. I thought they were going to make some big splashes. But I was disappointed in their haul over what they got in free agency. So I'm not as high on them. I don't expect it to win the Super Bowl. I wish I could take the bet back at this point, but it's just a speculative thing at 150 to 1. I thought I'd take a shot. I think they're going to be a lot better this year. I think they're going to win maybe 6 or 7 games. Peterson's an upgrade by default. Trevor Lawrence, he had a rough rookie year, but he made some good strides as the year progressed. And his performance against Colts in Week 18 was amazing. So what do you think about the Jaguars?
Peterson, former quarterback-minded coach, obviously did wonders with Wentz and Nick Foles when he was in Philly winning that Super Bowl. And I like that he's now paired with Trevor Lawrence, who I thought was worth every bit of the hype coming out. I just think he was in one of the worst situations we've seen in the last decade in the NFL. So I like Lawrence making a jump. I like Jacksonville making a jump. Would not have bet them to win the Super Bowl, but I think they're going to win probably twice as many games as they won last year. 2-1. Look at that. Where's the gong? There's the gong. The game is up. How do you feel, Walt? Do you feel good about your performance in today's 30 minutes of football match?
Yeah, thought it was a solid performance. But all the credits to the coaches and the players supporting cast.
110%. We blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Well, Walt, thank you so much for coming on. Definitely love your betting insights. As we mentioned, guys, we're going to be bringing on Walt more frequently. as a regular guest, specifically with regards to his betting knowledge. So if you want to use 30 minutes of football, legit football, to kind of get more of that, the odds, I mean, this is the guy. He's literally about to go spend some time in Vegas. So Walt, thanks for coming on. Make sure to check out walterfootball.com or look him up on Twitter at walterfootball. Reach out to us, Brian at legitfootball.com, at _legitfootball on Twitter. Thanks, guys. We'll see you Friday at the same time. This has been 30 minutes of football with Legit Football. Cue outro.